Hey, it's Norm from Tested. I'm here at Oculus Connect 2, a developer conference for virtual reality, and I'm here with Owlchemy Labs, Alex Schwartz, and Devin Reimer, both working on Job Simulator. That's your game using Oculus Touch. How you guys doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having us here.
Yeah, and how's the response been to Job Simulator so far?
Oh, it's been fantastic. A lot of people have been coming up to us in like elevators and stuff like that. They're like, Job Simulator, so that's been great.
We've been telling people that you guys are making one of the first fully thought out games that use physical controllers in virtual reality, both on the HTC Vive and here also with the Oculus Touch. But we want to let people out there also know what the game is. So what is Job Simulator? What's the idea? How did you guys come up with it? And what are the things you can do in it?
All right, so Job Simulator in the future in 2050, the robots have taken all of our jobs. And so with none of the jobs left, the robots were nice enough to build this simulator so that we don't forget as humans what it was like to job. So you can go back in time and try out what was it like to cook, but the robots got their research super wrong. So like in our kitchen demo, you put some items into a pot to make soup, and then you get an aluminum can of soup, and they're like, yep, that's how cooking worked. And so the office job, which is basically like an office space kind of esque satire of working in a cubicle. It's just, again, totally wrong, and it's like a dirty lens upon the past from the future.
A lot of humor in it, and the way it's framed is these levels where you guys have unveiled 3 so far: the kitchen, the supermarket, and then also the office here. And they're kind of sandboxy, where there's a goal and a series of actions you're supposed to do, but then you're just free to do whatever you want. So in making this game, how do you guys come up with all these weird interactions that make use of virtual reality and controls?
So it was just a matter of watching people play the game and just determining what they were doing. So like someone reaches to try to do something and it doesn't do what they want to do, and it's like, okay, now we have to build an action for that. And we continuously build systems on top of systems. So for example, in the office, we showed off this fluid simulation, which is a cartoony little fluid thing, and then people want to pour between cups, and then they want to pour some coffee creamer into their coffee before they drink it, and all these different interactions that kind of build on our systems.
Yeah, we're kind of going down the rabbit hole of building the depth of real life, and so it's like, where does it end? But there's some obvious things that we miss because we're blind to what people really want to do. We build a whole suite of things that we think will be great, and then the first person that comes in, a good story was my wife grabbed a plate off of the shelf in the kitchen and threw it to the floor, and it didn't break, and she goes, "Oh, this game sucks." And we're like, all right, number 1 thing on the task list, make plates breakable. And it's just so hard to know exactly what people are going to do, like that copy machine in the office. I don't want to give away too much, but we went down that rabbit hole super hard and made it so that you could do all these different things with it because people tried to do it. And when the game does something that they're like, this game's never going to support that action, and then it works, it's this magical moment where they're like, you devs, you did it, I can't believe it.
It reminds me a lot like Scribblenauts, where the developer is just with beta testing and with input from the community, and just putting it through the lens of what a child would do, and as opposed to just game design, then you can also just open up all these different verbs and actions and interactions that, frankly, just eventually will simulate real physics and real life, right? How hard is that to do from a game design standpoint and from a technical standpoint to program all that in?
It's surprisingly challenging. Up until now, physics systems kind of have been good enough. So watching something on a 2D screen, it's the physics freak out a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. But in VR, that actually becomes a big deal because it can do things like break presence and stuff like that. But luckily in our game, because it's more cartoony, when the physics does something a little bit funny, it's this game is doing something funny. But yeah, it's pretty challenging.
Also, you mentioned the childlike wonder of interacting with things. We've actually been approaching the ergonomic design and affordance designs of things in the world, kind of like a Little Tikes playset, where it's small children are able to figure out how to use that little cash register in the Little Tikes thing. And so when you're in VR, you kind of feel like a child, and it's primitive in a way, it's such early VR, that we want to make these interactions just work for everybody. So we're looking at designs of, how does the real world work, and make it as easy as possible to figure that out. And plus, people love to be children in that, people just throwing shit over their shoulders and throwing things out into the distance. People love to just mess up the room, depending on the person. Some people are like, oh, I need to move this very slowly and carefully. And in the kitchen, someone knocks over the sriracha. And some people, they bend over and they're like, oh, let me put that back. I think it's a weird psych test of what kind of person are you. Do you want to destroy the world, or do you want to keep it nice and clean?
Well, those interactions are facilitated by the touch controls, and you guys started, I believe, with the HTC Vive with the stick controls, and the ergonomics of those are a little different than the ergonomics of Oculus Touch. So, as one of the few developers working on both platforms, how do you design a game so that you actually can accommodate both, and what are the limitations or what are the opportunities afforded by using these hip controls?
So while they're different shapes, like you're kind of grabbing more of a cylindrical stick, with the Vive controller, and the touch kind of you're wrapping around it. The great thing is that we've kind of, I don't know if this wasn't necessarily planned, but it just happened, is that we've got across the board with the three major players kind of an alignment in feature sets of track controllers. So never before have we been able to have one-to-one tracking with real hand presence, where it's like, this is my hand in the game, with also an overlap in having a trigger and a secondary button. And so while you do hold them slightly differently, it all kind of comes down to the same thing. Is like, I've got my hands, I can pick things up using a single trigger, and I can activate them. And so actually Job Simulator only has 2 buttons in the entire game. It's just move around, click, and then a secondary click every once in a while. So yeah, it's great. We could just kind of build our interaction system to work across platforms, and we've always been multi-platform, kind of like as a strategy for our company. So it's really good to have standardization.
With the 3 controllers, some will offer, for example, the Vive has the touchpad, and touch allows you to point at things. Are you thinking about incorporating some of those features, maybe just even if they're not interactions in the game, but visually? Because you guys aren't using the Oculus, the virtual hands. You guys are using your own hands.
Well, we want to make sure grandma can still use it, right? Like your story, go for it.
Definitely. So like we brought my grandma over to my house in early days when we were testing the kitchen, and we said just click the triggers to grab stuff and release to release stuff, and she just played Job Simulator, which is fantastic because she hadn't played games before. Games are just unapproachable, and all of a sudden now she can do that. So we're trying to reduce the load of what previous knowledge you need to have to be able to play games. So that's kind of what makes Job Simulator magical.
So yeah, in that sense, we don't, because we're building for like real local space around you, we don't have to try to tutorialize the concept of point in a direction and like click a new thing to portal you to another land. We're building within the constraints of like what I think makes standing VR amazing is the ability to locomote on your own and have no vestibular mismatch, and everything just works and no one gets sick. So we're trying to say like, what games can we build in that? What would be the holy grail game for track controls, and that's how we arrived at Job Simulator.
You can't think of it as a lowest common denominator. It is just the ease of use, and it's great that all 3 of these systems, from their testing, the trigger buttons, having 2 buttons, is what they've all settled upon. Now, local action and locomotion are also interesting ideas in VR, and you guys have a standing VR experience, which standing, I think, is like a presence multiplier. Yes. And some games you're going to be able to sit down and like interact in like a desktop environment. Yours, you actually have a 360 environment where you're walking around. Now, the 3 different systems will have different ranges in terms of like the visibility for the sensors, and they're also some are using inside out and outside in sensing technology. How did you design a game, and how much space are you allowing a player to move in the game?
Well, so you have to build your environments to afford the areas of like good tracked motion. So like we were talking about, how do you design for a system that doesn't allow you to put your hands completely behind your back? Right. And so we're saying like, well, you can turn around because all 3 major platforms have full 360 tracking on their head, but you can include, if you don't have a full 360 tracking setup, you can include your hands by your body or one hand by the other hand, and so you have to be careful about like where you place major pick-upable items. So like you could turn around, you can see interesting stuff, and that's great, but putting like the suite of really cool things you want to play with within kind of like a forward 180 for tracking systems that face you. That's kind of the constraint that you want to work within. So we're building tools in Unity to automate the rearrangement of the rooms so that we could build a room and then just have kind of like a set of rules as to how they move slightly. It's almost like an interior decoration problem. We're like, how big is your room? And so we're relying on the hardware APIs to tell us, okay, this guy's got 8 feet of width, and so we can actually go to like a medium-sized room, and so we've built kind of like scaled versions. You got a small, a medium, and a large, and they're all going to have the same amount of like interactive elements and fun that you can have. But in like the kitchen, I want to go from the fridge to the plate and actually like have people walk from one to the other. So might as well take up and use that available space to have like a more breathing room.
And that's not to say, one system can be better than the other, because we don't know that yet. They're not out yet. But even within, if you have one system, where you're going to have that system set up from user to user is going to be different. If it's going to be office, if you're going to have an empty, big penthouse suite, or if you're going to be in a living room, and so your game can scale. And that's a really interesting concept. Very cool.
One example I like to use is, say you have a laundry room. In real life, if it's a big laundry room, you could have your washing machine here and your dryer over here. Makes perfect sense. If you end up having a smaller room, people just stack them. They buy stackable ones. That totally works, and it kind of is tailored to that space. So,
how has it been working with Oculus Touch so far and developing for that? And you're feeling, having used some of the other technologies, you get the additional camera, and they're both put in front of you. What's been your experience?
It's been very similar. It's been kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a smooth experience to develop for mega early hardware. It's across the board. That's what we're getting ourselves into, being early launch titles on these hardware platforms. We get like things that are hot glued together from the companies. We see like the earliest of early non-consumer versions of the hardware, but they just want to get it to us as fast as possible so that we can start building the tech to make it work. So it's like harsh to compare build qualities of early developer hardware to each other, because like this one was made in a warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and this one was built by hand by the guy who shipped it to you, overnight by FedEx. And so we're just happy that all the partners that we've been working with have been super aware of the fact that while they're building all this incredible hardware and they can sell that, they know that the content is super important to launch. So they need us, we need them, and it's a good relationship because we understand we're both trying to make VR take off.
Awesome. What's next for Job Simulator? You guys unveiled 3 of the environments through the levels. How many are there, and when can we see the next one?
So we're announcing that there's 5 total jobs in the Job Simulator suite that'll launch. We haven't announced 4 and 5, but at a later date we'll be saying what those are. You should be super excited for them. Expect to keep it in the same vein of crazy mundane areas that have been gone completely over the top in silliness. And yeah, we'll be launching as a launch title on the Vive as well as the Oculus Touch when they actually do their official launches.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Great to chat with you guys.
Thanks, man.